Welcome to the Subject Matter Expert webinar, and today we are going to dive into digital transformation and the role of virtual assistants with Howard Tiersky. I'm your host for the day, Vartika Verma. I'm the VP of Marketing at Yellow Messenger, world's fastest growing conversational AI platform. And today we're in conversation with a distinguished speaker, like I said, Howard Tiersky. Howard Tiersky is the best-selling author and has been named by IDG as one of the top 10 digital influencers to follow today. And by Enterprise Magazine 360 Degrees, one of the top 10 digital transformation influencers that will change your world. It's such a pleasure to have you on board, Howard, and we are also going to be talking about your recently published book, which I find really exciting. And it's titled Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance.
Indeed.
So good to have you on the show, Howard. How are you doing today?
Very well, very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So Howard, I gave a quick introduction about you, but there's of course a lot more to you because you've been in this space for so long. So would you want to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Well, sure. Well, gosh, I've been doing work around digital transformation for 25 or so years. I began with large consulting companies. I worked for a number of years for Ernst & Young Consulting, and then years ago that was sold to Capgemini. So then I worked for a number of years for Capgemini. I think it was 15 or 16 years total between those two companies. And that was tremendous because I had the opportunity to work with really dozens of Fortune 1000 huge global brands that were Capgemini and Ernst & Young's clients, where I got to be really on the ground floor of a lot of efforts to transform. Of course, the kinds of transformation that have been ongoing have changed over the years, right? I mean, initially it was, how do we just get e-commerce going, in the early days? And today, of course, it's about a wide range of things from conversational commerce and virtual assistants like you guys work on to, buy online, pick up in the store, virtual reality, augmented reality, and just all kind of, obviously AI, machine learning, big data, a lot of different ways of creating better and better and better customer experiences. And then about 14 years ago now, I started my own company. So I run a digital agency and consulting firm, which is called From, the Digital Transformation Agency. And we work with more or less the same large brands, large global brands, like Avis or JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, large sports leagues, television networks like NBC, to help them with their ongoing, seemingly never-ending process of trying to keep up with the change in the world.
Absolutely. So Howard, digital transformation as we know it, it's become a buzzword now, has become on top of CEOs and CIOs' agenda today. But you envisioned that this would be a large space almost 14 years back. So what was the insight that led you to dive into this, almost more than a decade back?
Well, I think you give me too much credit. I've just been in the trenches helping clients solve their problems year in and year out for many years. I didn't sit there 14 years ago and say, I see the future. No, I mean, I think it's really just a matter of you're working with a company and what are their challenges and what are their opportunities. And so when you see every business has certain challenges and some are solvable and some are not solvable, right? I mean, I don't know, you run a store and at Christmas time, the most popular products that everyone wants are out of stock. Can you solve that problem? I don't know, maybe not. Most stores don't solve it, right? It's just part of life, right? Or on very busy days, there's long lines for checkout. And, there's certain things in business that are problems, but there might not be a solution to. And then one day, something happens with technology and you say, wait a minute, maybe we can solve this problem. Maybe everyone who wants this product in the store can go to a kiosk and order it and put it on back order so we don't have to lose all those sales. Maybe there's a way to avoid people standing in line for checkout like Amazon Go does. All of a sudden technology creates an opportunity. And so to me, a lot of my work has always been trying to understand where there's an opportunity to improve the customer's experience. And in some cases, it's something that we've even forgotten is fixable because it never used to be fixable. So we've just not accepted it as part of how it goes in our business. But disruptors in every category are the ones who figure out, wow, you shouldn't have to drive to the store to buy a book. You can order it online, or or I should be able to stream videos to my home, not have to go to a video store. Now, those are old examples, but look at a more recent example, ride sharing, something like Uber and Lyft. All of a sudden realizing that there's a better way to do this, and technology makes it possible, whether it's Lyft or Airbnb or other similar services. So it's getting that, it's helping on a, my work has been year in and year out, because that wasn't possible 15 years ago. People didn't have mobile phones in their pockets. It wasn't a practical thing to try to do back then. But my work has just been working with companies year in and year out to understand where are the greatest customer points of pain, where is their cost in their operation, and where, as technology continues to evolve, can that be solved. And for some companies, they're more on the leading edge, and it's about figuring out something new. For other companies, it's about saying, well, gosh, a lot of other competitors of yours are already doing a certain thing. We should probably be doing it here. And then it's about figuring out, well, why aren't we doing it? What's the problem? What's the barrier? Is it a technology barrier? Is it a budget issue and people aren't bought into the ROI? Is it resistance to change? People just don't want to shift to a new model. What's holding us back? And then trying to be a detective and figure out, okay, what's holding us back from being where we need to be, and how do we deal with whatever that barrier is?
Absolutely. So, Howard, even I was researching a little bit about this, and even with our clients, we see that many a times clients come who have tried their hands at digital transformation multiple times and have failed. And even if you look at the stats from Gartner, they say that about 90% of corporate leaders today have this on their top priority, and yet 80% of the initiatives are failing.
Right.
So what do you think is really driving this failure? You did talk about a few points, that is resistance to change, too many technologies, the twin challenges of budgeting plus maintaining CSAT. What, according to you, are the core drivers of failure in digital transformation?
Yeah. Well, you listed a bunch of them, and we go into a number of them in my book. But I certainly think that digital transformation is very challenging. There's an old joke. I don't know if you have it in India, but someone stops for directions and asks, well, how do I get to such and such a place? And the person giving the direction says, well, if that's where you're trying to get to, I wouldn't start from here. And, well, thanks, but what am I supposed to do with that? So I think, when you're a large enterprise, you're moving a giant battleship, and yes, they have all the challenges and problems that you mentioned. But, since you already mentioned all those, I'll mention one more, which is, what is failure anyway? When we see these statistics, and I use them all the time, the ones you mentioned, that show how many digital transformations fail. And well, frankly, I wrote a book all about a process for doing digital transformation. And, it may be that some of them fail because they don't follow the right process. I think that's definitely true when they're heavily technology driven. I think that my view and what my book is all about is a customer-centric approach to digital transformation. And the reason that I believe that that's really the only logical approach is because the customers, that's where the money comes from. So, most success in business is a result of driving customer behavior. If you can successfully get customers to do what you want them to do, you're going to be in good shape. It's not the only thing that's important in business. There's other things, optimization of your manufacturing process or, supply chain. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but if customers love you and will do what you want them to do, there's a lot of wiggle room to not be perfect in those other areas. But if your customers aren't on board, if they don't think you have a good value proposition, if you're not satisfying them, then you can optimize your supply chain all you want. You've probably not got a very good business. So that's the number one thing. And so I think that the purpose of digital transformation in my mind is not to improve the technology of a company, for example, or to be able to say to shareholders, look, we're digital, but to make sure that we are creating the experience that will resonate and be desirable for today's digital customer. And that's why I call my book Winning Digital Customers, because what I mean by a digital customer is that today's customers mostly have digital at the center of their lifestyle. And so you need to be delivering an experience that works well for that, which isn't only about digital, by the way. I'll give you an example. A lot of fast food restaurants are starting to put in second drive-through windows. There's one drive-through window for your normal person who drives up and says, I'll have a hamburger and fries, and then they have to make it, and all that. But for people who order on their phone, there's a second drive-up window because, of course, it's much faster, right? Who can just be like, I'm picking up my order, and they go right through, and they're not waiting in line behind people. So it's not just about doing things that are digital. It's about adapting your whole value proposition to to work well for this idea of digital customers. And I think that one reason that a lot of companies aren't successful is that they don't start with that at the center. They say, well, I'll tell you a funny story. I was being interviewed for another podcast, I think it was, and I won't say the company because I don't want to make anyone look bad, but it was a giant technology company, one of the world's 5 or 6 largest technology companies. And the person who was interviewing me said, well, they were asking me, of course, about digital transformation. And they said, well, what do you think is the future of digital transformation, AKA cloud migration? That's how they asked the question. And I was like, to you, digital transformation is the same thing as cloud migration? I mean, wow. To me, that's just like a complete, very foreign idea. I certainly, and of course, they were in the business of selling. That's what their business was, right? They wanted everyone to move things to the cloud. But, and I'm all for it, right? I'm all for cloud migration, don't get me wrong. But that is not the core of what digital transformation is all about. The core is about creating an experience which resonates with today's customers, and the associated change, possibly including cloud migration and microservices and a whole bunch of other things that are necessary in order to create that experience. So I have one more reason I can tell you about, but there's some reasons right there. So if you want more, I'll give you one more, but if not, we can move on.
I think that's a very interesting point that you touched upon. And, a lot of times when we at Yellow Messenger also speak with large clients, they have like a lot of data, they have legacy systems in place, and they have migrated to cloud. So what happened is the last decade was all about, migrating to the cloud. And now this decade is all about making sense of that. And that is where we feel that, how to sort of remodel your business, how to sort of look at customer experiences again, like you mentioned, the second driveway. And that is where even conversational AI sort of comes in as a layer and tries to make sense of that data and make it really usable. So like the way we have SAP and a few more daunting kind of, platforms that we work with as well. But it's better to just have that information coming on WhatsApp that, okay, my team members have applied for a leave, etc. So I totally understand your point there. And how about, just like when you are looking at what should be the benchmarks, or how do you judge whether a digital transformation is successful or not? What do you think are the core KPIs that an organization should look at really?
Yeah. Well, I think that there is a series of layers that you need to think about. Any sizable business investment has to drive the levers that equate to business success. And in the vast majority of businesses, there are 3, and really in a way only just one: revenue, profit, or EBITDA, or net revenue, whatever you want to call it, and valuation, right? So if you're a public company, it's your share price. And if you're a private company, it's the value that reasonably someone would pay to acquire all or part of your business. In the end, the people that run, for-profit businesses anyway, this is the job. This is the job of a CEO, is to make a business more valuable and to generate dividends. That's it. So you have to start from there and just understand that that's the purpose of the business. Now, I don't wake up every morning thinking, how can I get more dividends from my clients' shareholders? That doesn't get me inspired. But you have to just know that that's the ultimate target that you're shooting for. And so you need some KPIs that are associated with those things. Part of the challenge is that a lot of things affect those things. And so you can't always know exactly what the impact of your digital transformation is compared to other things, like the market changes, like, the needs of your customers change, like obviously other things going on in your company, that aren't as relevant to the digital transformation can of course also affect it. So then the next level down, what's the next level down? And to me, it's customer behavior. As I said earlier, customer behavior is a major, major driver of those business outcomes. So then you want to ask, well, what are the things that you want to measure in customer behavior? And it's probably things like traffic, conversion, shopping cart size. Of course, it depends on your business, right? If you're in a subscription business, it's your churn or your renewal rate. So you have these KPIs, which of course are the key things that are driving your costs as well, employee retention. There can be a lot of different, goals that are behavioral goals. And then what I always like to look at is, what is it that influences behavior? And it's thoughts and feelings, right? That's what cause people to behave one way or another. So it's good to have metrics that look at those, right? What is the perception of your brand in your marketplace? What is the morale of your employees? What do customers think about your products? What are the online reviews saying about your products? These are all opportunities to measure, before we get to behavior, what are people thinking and feeling, the people who we care about? And you could even include your investors in there, because if your goal is to increase the value of your company, what is in the mindset of your investors or analysts that influence your investors? And then at the lowest level, but it's the most actionable level, is experience. Because we know that what causes people to have certain thoughts and feelings are the experiences. I mean, when we're born, we don't have a lot of thoughts and feelings, right? We're just crying and mad because, someone turned on the lights. But then we go through life and we have a series of experiences, and that's really what shapes us and mostly shapes our thoughts and experiences. And so as a company, as a brand, we have the opportunity to give thoughts and experiences to our customers, whether those are sales-related thoughts and whether those are sales-related experiences like an ad or a website where they're shopping, or whether they are, experiences of your product or service. So I think in the end, we want to measure that, right? What kind of measurements do we have for that? Well, speed of websites, satisfaction with people going through different processes, the likelihood of, what time on site, there's a whole bunch of KPIs. And of course, it depends a little bit on the type of experience that help us see what's the quality of the experience. And so then in the end, we're measuring these things at different levels. The level that we can affect most directly is the experience. So we measure that, but we have to know that those measurements are feeding into thoughts and feelings measurements, which feed into behavioral measurements, and ultimately in financial measurements. So that might sound like a lot of measurements, but the reality is that it's a little bit of it's like one of those desktop toys where you pull the ball back, and it hits the ball, the other ball goes off the other side. You have to be aware that there's a few levels here. And if we measure at each level, then we can start to and say, well, the revenue's down. Why? Well, are the behaviors changing? Yeah. Well, why? Do people feel or think differently, or something changed? And go through and kind of look at that mechanism of those 4 levels. And that's like how I like to think about KPIs.
Great, Howard. I mean, now I can understand why so many large companies have worked with you, because you're actually helping them drive their core profits and shareholder value, and how digital transformation can really impact that. So yeah, after speaking with you, I'm more and more convinced about why I need to read your books and why all these great companies have worked with you.
Well, thank you. To me, it's just very practical. I'm not a philosopher, I'm more of a plumber, I've just been working in companies for so long, and the questions are very often the same. How can we make more money? How can we have our customers be more loyal? Blah, blah. And then it's like, all right, well, it's like fixing an engine, Yeah, there are some different parts to it, and you have to understand how the parts feed, if the gas tank is empty, well, of course the engine's not going to start. If the gas tank is full, but the fuel's not being pulled into the spark plug, that's a problem. If the spark, and on and on. And you just have to kind of understand there's this series of things so you can start to diagnose and say, well, where's the problem? And that's the purpose of KPIs, right? It's to be the needles, the gauges, to tell us where are things going right and where are things going wrong.
Absolutely. Great. So Howard, shifting gears a little bit here, Yellow Messenger as a company, we really believe in the power of the conversational layer. And we're very curious to know what your perception of the future of virtual assistants in the digital transformation journey is.
Yeah, sure. Well, virtual assistants are what gives us that sort of magical connection between self-service and true, classic idea of customer service. And I think they're really important for a couple of reasons. And the reason that most people think of them as being important is because they take cost out. And that is really important, because when we've studied, and one of the things we talk about in the book is, what are the 3 characteristics of the most successful brands in a digital age? And there are 3. One is hyper-convenience, one is proactive personalization, and one is increased value, meaning you just get more for your money. It's cheaper, or, I pay a $9 Netflix subscription and I get all that content, versus the old days I'd spend $6 and just rent one video. Just more for less. Well, if you want to accomplish those goals, first of all, you have to find ways to take cost out in order to be able to deliver more for less, or massively increase your revenue without increasing your cost, like with global scalability through digital. So obviously that's sort of an obvious way that virtual assistants potentially support that, by handling calls that otherwise would have to be handled more expensively. They also act as a hyper-convenience component, because most people don't really like calling call centers, for example. I mean, there's always that small percentage of people who are lonely and want someone to talk to. But for most people, this is not how they want to spend their time. And so if you can make it more convenient for someone to get their questions answered, and of course, you can, of course, do customer service online chat as well. But we've probably both had this. And sometimes you need to, right? Because not everything can be handled virtually. But what you discover is that most companies that create online chat customer service, there's still a wait. So even though it's maybe less inconvenient than picking up the phone, you're next in queue. You're waiting 5 minutes, you're still waiting, and that's frustrating. Versus be able to get instant answers. And by the way, I think most customer service representatives are happier handling the more complicated cases than answering the same question over and over and over. How late is your store open? Till 5. How late is your store open? Till 5. I mean, so in many cases, you can handle 20% of the questions that make 85% of your calls, and all of a sudden have your people spending their time with the cases that are really need more personal assistance, And I think the last thing that I would say, and this is maybe the least obvious, but one of the most important, is that most customers in most situations prefer to be self-directed. Now, there are definitely exceptions. There's a lump in your shoulder and you don't know what it is. You want to talk to a person. You're stranded on the side of the road at night and your car won't start and you're scared. You want to talk to a person. There are definitely times, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 5%, but there are definitely times when you want to talk to a human being. So we're not talking about that stuff, right? That exists, but we're talking about the other 90% of things, right? When you really would prefer to just be self-directed. So what most people are going to do, and we do a lot of analysis of customer journeys, is they feel like at the top of the journey, there's this branch. Do I call or do I go to the website? And of course, a lot of people are going to go, well, I'd rather go to the website because it should be faster and less of a hassle. But then I start going through the experience on the website, and I'm partway through. I've done some of it. I've brought up my account. I've looked at certain things, but now there's something confusing that I don't understand. So what am I going to do now? Well, I could go all the way back up to the top, say, forget this experience of going, on the website, and say, okay, that was a failure. I'm going to go back up to the beginning. I'm going to call, and what's the person going to say? Well, what's your name? What's your account number? And I wasted all that time. Or you can be one of those dogs on the mountain climbing, that you get partway up the mountain and then you have a problem and he brings you whatever he brings you.
Yeah.
You could just run in and save me. And then for that, from a technology perspective, what's essential is that you can preserve context. What's essential is that you can say to that person, hey, Howard Tiersky, account number 12345. I see that you're trying to transfer money between your accounts. Can I help you? So I don't have to be like, my name is Howard. I'm trying to transfer money. It's like, you know what I'm doing, and you can just be my assistant at that moment and help me through whatever that little speed bump might be in my self-service experience. And by the way, then make sure that that data is well recorded, because it may be that you found an edge case where your self-service experience is inadequate, confusing instructions, a feature that's missing, data elements that are missing. And if you have enough of those requests, it makes sense to say, well, wait a minute, if we just made one change to our self-service experience, people would stop asking for help. Great. But so often when they call the call center the old way, you never really understand what failed for them. They're just starting from scratch, and you lose the opportunity to gather that data. So those are some of the reasons why I think they're a really important part of many customer journeys, whether it's shopping or financial services or healthcare or a range of other types of experiences customers have.
Absolutely, Howard. And when we also work with our large enterprises, we have this module called Agent Assist, which is typically a human in the loop. And, that is pretty much the gateway to using chatbots efficiently, because the idea here is to serve employees and customers better and not replace anything. So we do see a lot of our enterprise customers, especially in the banking sector, even though blocking a card is a very simple process on a chatbot, somebody is really panicked that has somebody stolen my card and they want to speak to a human. So we are very cognizant of that fact, and we do offer those modules, which I believe are going to be really important for all large enterprises. And talking about enterprise features, I wanted to understand from your experience, like, have you led any digital transformation, journeys where it's a cross-nation, international project, and what are the, extra challenges that you see happening there?
Yeah, many. Well, I'll tell you the first challenge, which is that very often in international companies, each country, or sometimes it's each region, there's politics between these different groups, and they want autonomy. They don't want to be told how to operate. And so very often they will say, well, you have to understand that things are different in Latin America. We need to do things differently here, or things are different in Southeast Asia, or things are different in wherever. And, in Germany, we have different privacy laws, whatever else. And that may be true. I mean, of course, things are different in different countries. Hard to argue with that. But does that mean you need a completely different technology? Does that mean you need a completely different process, a completely different user experience? Almost always it does not mean that. And so one of the things that we see is that executives that want to maintain, when you're trying to do digital transformation, usually part of what you're trying to do is do things as holistically as possible. And many companies over the years have built up in silos. Different product areas have their own content management systems. I'll tell you something in your area, for example. There's a story in my book where I went on customer service chat with Dell. I say it's Dell in the book, so. And I had a problem that I was trying to resolve with an order. And I placed it online. And I'm chatting with the guy, and he goes and looks at my order, and he says, your order was fulfilled by the small business group, but I am with the small office, home office group, okay? Not the small business group. And so you need to talk to them and not me. And I'm like, okay, so how do I chat with them? He said, oh, they don't have chat. You have to call them, right? So I'm like, what? So the different chat platforms, or some have chat and some don't have chat. And that's just an example, but it's like you have these silos. And then so you have to bust through this pre-existing resistance and this mindset, which is things are different here. I did a project many years ago for General Motors, large automaker. And they had a parts ordering system. So every dealership, when they needed to order parts because they were repairing cars, would have to order them from GM, a new carburetor or wheel or whatever. So they had a system for that, but they had many systems. Different brands in different countries had all built their own applications, which the dealerships and garages then used when they needed to order parts. And our job was to create one global system, which would save an enormous amount of money because they were maintaining like 15 different systems. But every country initially said, well, but things work differently here. The reason we have our own system is things work different. Well, we did a whole analysis, and what we discovered is, yes, it's 5% different, right? It's 95% the same. So part of it is just doing the work to really get past the argument that everyone needs their own thing without ignoring the fact that, yes, they may have some unique needs that have to be taken into consideration, but looking to create something which is sort of consistent throughout is almost always going to give you a better result in the end for many reasons, for cost, for training, for your ability to add a feature in one place and it can be utilized everywhere, all those types of reasons. So I think that's certainly one reason. And of course, just working collaboratively with people all around the world has a variety of challenges that are sort of obvious. You're on the phone, you're not in person, you have, of course, time zone issues and cultural issues and language issues. And so the good news is one of the things that COVID is doing for us is it's making us all practice and get better and better at working, at least using remote technology. That doesn't always overcome every issue. But, I think that's going to get better and better. I mean, I've been on a number of Zooms recently where we have real-time translation by translators. And some of the companies are providing that now. And I wouldn't be surprised if very, very soon we see increasing amounts, I don't know if you have this in your product, but of real-time translation so that we could be having a conversation in two different languages with subtitles that are pretty reasonably good, reasonably accurate. And so I think that as the continuing technology growth happens, this type of collaboration has been getting easier and is going to continue to get easier. So there's many other things, of course, making sure that things are localized for local cultures and things like different colors have different meanings and stop signs don't look the same everywhere around the world and all these types of things that you have to bear in mind. But those are some of the issues.
Great. Thank you for that input, Howard. And to answer your question, yes, we do have a multilingual NLP engine. So basically, if you can train your bot in French and it can be ready in 120 plus languages.
Yeah.
So definitely, with all the clients that we have in US, Europe, that's been a very, very core demand. And being a country based out of India, here itself, we have 26 languages. So I think we went, into a platform language first. So that really helped us, sort of enter Europe and all. So that's great. And Howard, in terms of, the current pandemic, how do you think, that has impacted digital transformation? As a company operating in the conversational AI space, we see a 4x demand, from our current customers expanding scope and new clients coming on board. So the last 4 years, the number of logos that we added, and the last 6 months, it's at the same weightage. So we are seeing a phenomenal increase, but what's your sense of the market? Are people still sitting on the edge, or are they diving into digital transformation head on given COVID-19?
Well, first of all, congratulations for being in the right place at the right time. There's plenty of, I know companies in both categories, right? Some companies that were just in the wrong place because what they do became less needed and less relevant in the era of COVID, and others, of course, that became more. So that's either strategic genius or just luck. But anyway, it's good. Secondly, I think that I see companies in multiple categories. I see companies who have been behind and have realized that, nobody's been ignoring digital, of course. Everybody's doing something, but it's a question of how fast you really move it. You can be walking and it can feel like you're running, especially if there's a lot of resistance, and then all of a sudden you step back and you realize, wow, for everything we've been doing, we need to 10x our investment because we have to get farther faster or we're just going to become irrelevant. And so I think that there's a number of companies that have done that. There's also many companies who are, unlike your company, have seen massive reductions in revenue associated with COVID, and therefore are in this difficult situation of wanting to do more, but not having the money and just being in terrible financial straits. And so many of those companies have increased awareness and maybe regret for not having invested prior to now, but it's difficult for them to take action. And I've seen other companies where they have a lot of employees who can't do their normal jobs because, maybe they're just not relevant because their stores are closed. And they've been able to say, well, this is an opportunity to use all those people to get to some of the work that we've been meaning to do. Maybe it's, dealing with, a legacy debt in our systems or other things like that. So some companies are just saying, well, we don't want to lay people off. Let's use them to try to move forward on some longer term transformation initiatives. So, I see all of it. And I think, one thing I'd say about COVID too, and it's funny because when the book was coming out, we had finished the book before the pandemic hit, and it was actually being proofread while the pandemic first started in March and April. So it was done basically. And so the publisher said, gosh, digital is being so impacted by COVID. Do you guys want to change anything in the book? Do you want to update it? And we thought about it, but we realized, we really didn't change anything because the book is about change. The book is about the digital transformation that's happening in the world, which goes on whether you want it to or not, as customers become more and more digital. And then the need to change your own organization essentially to keep up. There's a great quote, which I love, which is in the book, from Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric for many years. And during the time he was the CEO, General Electric stock rose by 4,000%. And Jack Welch said, when the speed of change on the outside exceeds the speed of change on the inside, the end is near. Kind of a depressing quote, but I think there's a lot of companies that have been feeling this for some years, which is that they're not able to keep up with the speed. And then, of course, what COVID really did from most companies' perspectives is really just increase the speed of change. It's just moving us more rapidly towards where we were going anyway, which means that if you were already behind as a company, well, it's like if you're in a race and you're not running as fast as the fastest runner, and then the fastest runner starts running faster. You're even more behind. You got to find a new way. You have to really change the game in terms of the speed of your change, or else you're going to lose the race.
Right. And, talking about COVID work from home situation, how many companies are now focusing on internal automation as well, like HR, ITSM, or in your mind, has that taken a back seat because people are looking at customer facing communication and transformation more heavily?
That's an interesting question, and it's a variable. I've talked to companies. I spoke to one chief digital officer at a large Fortune 500 company, and he said to me, I've been here for 3 years. My entire focus has been on the customer for 3 years. Digital transformation to improve the customer experience, all the stuff I talk about. And he goes, one day, all of my attention shifted to our employees. I was brought into the CEO's office and told our employees that used to all come to the office, they all have to work from home. And this is our biggest business risk right now, not our customers, our employees. You need to focus all of your energy and attention on how do we make sure that they are able to work from home, that they know how to use Zoom or whatever other tools are needed. Some of it's real hardcore, right? As our VPN up to snuff to be able to handle everyone, how do we make sure that that's secure? All of those things. And the employee became more important, at least temporarily, than the customer. Because of course, if your employees can't work, you can't serve your customer, right? If your call center team can't go into the call center and they've got to work from home, you got to solve that problem. That becomes, immediately important. So I think that's one sort of trend. But then the other trend that I've certainly seen is people's customers' needs have dramatically changed in most industries. And so those that are focused on digital all of a sudden have, again, it's that same theme of more rapid change. For example, and I don't have the statistics in front of me. I went over them on a live cast I did recently, but the percentage of buy online, pick up in the store has increased dramatically. Right. And the percentage of retailers that offer that or curbside pickup, of course, has, whatever it is, quadrupled or something. So there were stores that were offering it before, but it was a small percentage. And now all of a sudden everyone is offering it. So there's this need to figure out how do we get that going and quickly. And so that is the type of customer-facing transformation which has become a high priority, certainly for retailers.
Great, Howard. I think we're feeling the same feelers from the market. I want to talk a little bit about your book and try and understand who is this book for and who should read it. People getting into digital transformation, middle of it, end of it, all of them. And just want to understand, what are the core takeaways that you would sort of expect people to take from after reading your book, Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance?
Yeah, sure. Well, I would say that it's for anybody who's working at a company and is involved in some aspect of digital, whether that's someone in marketing or someone in IT or someone in operations or a CEO or someone in top management. Or even someone in finance or legal or HR who needs to be thinking and understanding the digital workings of the company. That's really who it's for. And at most companies, that's a lot of people. Maybe not everybody, but it's a lot of people because this shift to digital is such an important part of what's going on in most companies. In terms of what the book really does is it helps describe and make clear what do we mean by digital transformation? Why is it absolutely essential? What are the biggest challenges? And we've talked about some here. And then what is a 5-step process so you can go through and actually accomplish it? And it breaks that down into detailed instructions so that you can literally sit down with your team and say, and it doesn't matter if you've not begun it or you're in the middle of it, it doesn't really, it's fine in any of those cases. And it's fine if you're certainly my experiences with giant companies. So I write from the perspective of working with very large enterprises. I think a lot of the content in the book is totally applicable if you're a medium company as well. If you're just if you're just like you're a dry cleaners, you're one store, I don't know. I don't know if it's as applicable. Others will have to tell me because that's not my experience. So I don't write from that perspective. But I think a company of any reasonable size, if you have 100 employees, it's probably relevant for you. If you have 2 employees, I don't know, you'd have to figure that out. But it provides a process for how do you go about it? How do you go about it? And when I say go about it, it goes back to what I said earlier, which is it starts from who do we need to be to win with these customers? Not how do we implement SAP upgrades? That's not where it starts. That may be part of it, but that's not where it starts. Where it starts from is understand how our customers' needs are changing and what kind of a customer journey we need to give them for them to love us. I think the first question any company needs to ask themselves is, do your customers love you? Do they really love you? And the way the test, there's something we call the customer love continuum that we talk about in the book. And there's 5 levels. The top level is that you're loved. Then you're resonant. Then you're relevant. Then you're irrelevant. And then you're non-existent. Those are our levels. And so a brand that's loved, like for many people, Disney would be a brand that they love. For many people, Apple, Nike. Now, of course, no brand is loved by everybody, just like no person is loved by everybody. It's not about being loved by everybody. It's about being loved by your customers. And brands that are truly loved, if I said to you, how would you feel if that brand went away? There's no more Disney. They don't exist anymore. No more theme parks, no more Disney animated films. How do you feel? And a lot of people would feel devastated. And if that's how you feel, then that's a brand you love. If you go to the next level down, let's say a company like, in my world, Verizon. Verizon's a cell phone. I don't think you have Verizon in India, but we're one of our largest telecommunications companies. I use them for a lot of things. I like Verizon. If someone told me Verizon was gone, I'd be like, really, man? I'd be bummed. I wouldn't lose sleep over it. My life wouldn't change, but I'd be like, wow, that's really too bad. They were a great company. And then if you go down to the next level, a company that's just relevant, like let's take the gas station that I go to. Like there's a chain, like British Petroleum, right? They have gas stations all over. If British Petroleum went out of business, how would I feel? I'd be like, well, I need to know that, right? Because it means the gas station that I usually go to is closed. It means I got to find another one. No real emotional reaction, but it's relevant to me because they're something I use, and therefore I need to know they're gone. And then below that, it's less and less important. So you can kind of think for yourself, for the brands in your life, which are the ones that you love or that you just resonate or are relevant. And then ask yourself, how do most of your customers feel about your brand? And the reason why this matters is because the brands that are loved are the ones that have the greatest sales, the greatest profit, the greatest loyalty, the greatest repurchase, and the greatest valuation. That element of customer love pushes a massive number of positive business levers. And in order to be loved, you have to resonate with what people really care about. And that isn't only about digital. It's not. But because people are living a lifestyle with digital at the center, if you fail at digital, honestly, you've got no hope. And so the book is a formula for how to get there.
Yeah, and I think, what you explained is pretty much on the cover. At the heart of the customers, there's a nice little heart, which is saying how much customers love you and how much you love them. So thank you for telling us a little bit more about your book.
I'll hold it up.
And for everybody attending, yes, exactly. And for everybody attending here, grab your copy. The hardcover is available and the Kindle copy is available. And let's really look at the 5 processes that Howard's talking about. And have another conversation about how it felt to really implement those. So thank you so much for your time, Howard. It was great learning about how large enterprises look at digital transformation, the role of chatbots, and about how to look at a practical, customer-centric approach to transformation. Thank you for sharing your inputs. If there are any Q&As, if you'd be happy to stick around for some 10 minutes, we could probably take some Q&As that are coming in.
Sure, I have a few minutes, and thank you for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I see there's a couple here from Rajaram.
Yes. So Rajaram is asking which size of company by revenue or employees can afford a conversational AI project setup and maintain the same. I think it's a question for both, but Rajaram from, average 20 to 30,000 a year, and there is actually no upper limit. And depending on how many customers you have. So if you have over 10,000 customers or over 1,000 employees, I think conversational AI can really benefit your current benchmarks. Anything too small, I would really say that it will not really make a very, very big impact, because smaller the data, smaller the impact. So 10,000 plus customers, 1,000 plus employees is the benchmark. But we've personally worked with a lot of startups as well and grown along with them. And how are your views on that?
Well, I would say it's such an important technology that there are you guys provide a platform that's targeted towards, it's a very robust and sophisticated platform. I would say if you're a very small business, there are small, much less sophisticated platforms that might make sense for you as a way to get started. And then as your business grows and your needs become more sophisticated, you move into a more sophisticated platform. And I mean, I would say, for example, right in Facebook Messenger, you have some very simple abilities to build some simple flows, answering nothing more than basic questions like, when is your store open? Or, what is your phone number? So, in an afternoon, in many very simple platforms, you can answer the top 5. Think of it like an FAQ, and that's just level 1. There's so much you can do with these platforms, but I would say I would get started almost no matter what size business you are. I know people who are just a one-man operation, but they run a small Facebook Messenger based, conversational chatbot just to make sure they can answer people's questions. And so I would start there. I would start at the bottom and say there's no size that's too small for the idea, but there might be sizes that are too small for any particular platform. SAP is not good for a tiny company, but should you use something to manage your orders and all that? Yes, of course you should use something, but you're not ready for SAP. So I would say the same thing here. There are low-end platforms, and then you can graduate up into one like the one we're talking about here.
Great, thank you for the answer. I see no more questions. So great, thank you so much for spending your time with us, Howard. You have a great day ahead and look forward to having you on our webinar again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Have a great evening. Bye.